Animal welfare. All I can say is that every time a big truck drives by with pigs inside of it, I do cry, and they look very sad.
Can you tell me what the Farm Bill is?
Nope. Farm Bill? Yeah, nope.
Animal welfare? Well, I assume that's when an animal family is below the poverty line and receives additional support from the government. So the Farm Bill is the man who has worked on the farm for 80 years.
Tell me, what do you know about Proposition 12 in California?
Oh, nothing.
I know nothing about that. I'm so sorry.
Animal welfare, like how they take care of the animals.
You know, agricultural and food things.
I don't know what the Farm Bill is.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Contemporary Issues in Agriculture podcast. I'm your co-host, Sidney Schnor.
And I'm your co-host, Jess Rodman. And today we've got a really interesting topic for you. We are going to be learning from Carly and Ellie all about manure.
Oh, yeah. How exciting. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I've sure smelled manure when I've been driving. That's a pretty normal thing to experience in Iowa. And I'm interested to hear about the process since I don't know anything about it. So let's dive right in.
Welcome to our podcast, Women of the Harvest, where we're diving deep into the world of sustainable farming and manure management. I'm Carly, and alongside Ellie, we're joined by our guest, Andy, a seasoned farmer in Iowa, Jack Lacey, an environmental engineering major, and our neutral perspective, as well as Brian Waddingham, an executive director of the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers. We're discussing the future of manure in Iowa, the sustainability practices and the codes Andy follows, and the reasons behind these regulations. Andy, will you please discuss some of your experience and background in farming and how manure application plays into your daily life?
Yep, I've been farming since 99. I started custom farming in 2000 with silage, and I started custom manure application in, I think, 2016. And then I spread dry manure, not liquid.
Okay, that's great. Let's talk about some of the sustainable practices and codes that you have to follow, Andy. Can you share some of the key regulations and practices that you have to follow when you are spreading dry manure?
Okay, yeah. Every year we have a training course put on by the Iowa DNR, and my whole crew, everybody has to go. You usually go to an extension office or online, and we get trained every year on what we can and can't do, regulations, as far as how many feet away from wells, intakes, residents, churches, schools, rate of application, and just do's and don'ts on the roads, and then we are licensed. You have to pay a fee for everybody you have on your crew, and they do have to carry around a license when we are custom applying manure.
So what are some consequences if you don't follow those regulations or rules if you're spreading? Do you get some warnings, or do you just get your license taken?
Several different ways. You have to be placard. You have to have your name and contact on the manure spreaders. So if something happens on the road, someone can get that number, call the DNR or the local authorities. So you have to be advertised. And then if something does happen, it's like if you have a manure spreader tip over in the ditch, it's smarter for us to call the manure spill line through the Iowa DNR rather than having somebody drive by, see it, and then have them call. So it's always better to be proactive. And Yeah, and then they can, but we are placard so everybody sees who you are and who they can contact. And that is we have a CMS number, a license number, basically, so they can kind of track us and stuff.
And then what's a CMF number?
That's custom manure service. I'm not sure. I can't remember what the S is. That's just a program through Iowa DNR saying that we are putting it on custom, putting it on for a job, and then that we have gone through the testing.
Okay. So, to add to that, we have Brian with us who can shed more light on why these codes are crucial. Brian, what's your perspective on the importance of these regulations?
At the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers, we work with all different livestock and poultry farmers to help them interpret rules and regulations, site new barns and feedlots. And one of the things that we do answer a lot of questions on is the manure application. Obviously, there's the size does matter on the farm. If you're under 500 animal units, you don't have to have a manure management plan, but there are still rules that come with that. For instance, once you get over the 500 animal units, you do have separation distances to follow. If you're not going to incorporate the manure, such as from residences, water sources, that sort of thing. So we do help producers understand what those rules are. If they do need to become certified, we instruct them, once you hit so many animal units in a confinement, you do need to become a certified manure applicator. So we just kind of answer a lot of questions, but we're starting to see more and more people follow manure management plans because they really can recognize the value that livestock and poultry manure have on those crop acres.
That's great, Brian. Do you want to kind of explain what the Coalition of Iowa Farmers is for those who don't know?
Certainly. So we are an organization that's funded by Iowa's 9 major farm and commodity groups. Our sole mission is to help Iowa's livestock and poultry farmers site new barns and feedlots. We help interpret the more than 250 pages of rules and regs that apply to livestock farms. We work to enhance neighbor relations and then finally also implement best management practices such as planting trees around barns and feedlots. We've been around now for almost 20 years. And we offer our services to farmers at no charge and completely confidential, just to make sure that they can get off on the right foot and not have any surprises down the road from DNR or EPA.
Awesome. Another question for you, Brian, that just came up on the top of my head. You said that farms under 500 head have a little bit different regulations. Why is that? How was that number kind of picked for that management practice?
Yeah, I think when the code went into effect, they just kind of took 500 animal units as the number. So that would be 1,250 head of hogs, 500 head of cattle, 373 dairy cows. The number of head kind of fluctuates a little bit, but I think that was a starting point to say anybody under that threshold, there would be reduced or maybe not as stringent rules to follow. As when you got over the 500 animal units, then additional rules and regulations kick in, such as separation distances to neighbors, churches, cemeteries, the manure management plans, construction permits, and so on.
That's great. So, Brian, yourself, where do these rules and regulations come from? How is that process? How do you guys know those rules and regulations? Who implements those for you to communicate to the farmers?
So those rules would be from the Iowa DNR, and they have numerous publications. We are constantly reviewing them, and then based on our interpretation can advise farmers on what they can and can't do when it comes to hauling manure and poultry litter.
Awesome.
Okay. So Jack, will you please introduce yourself a little more in depthly, give us a little background as to why you decided to go into environmental engineering?
Yeah, so I'm Jack. As Carly said before, I'm a sophomore in environmental engineering. And the reason I chose to be in environmental engineering. I always knew that I wanted to do something within engineering. I took a lot of classes in high school and enjoyed, building things, seeing how they were made, seeing the internal pieces of everything. And then the environmental piece came in from my family. So my great uncle is involved a lot in, was actually an environmental um, engineer all of his life, and he did a lot with working with like renewable energy in Iowa over in the Cedar Rapids area. So hearing stories from my grandfather all my life definitely leaned me into something that I wanted to do, something also with science. So when I learned that, Iowa State offered a major called environmental engineering, I immediately jumped into researching what it was about, and it fit into exactly what I would want to look into the future a lot with like wastewater and water management.
That's great, Jack. So Andy and Brian have kind of talked about a lot of things, a lot of details, kind of a lot of information. So after listening to them just for a few minutes here, how can you interpret that into maybe your future career, and how could this information maybe help you in the future?
So I know they talked a lot about like the rules and regulations, and I know that's like a big piece in environmental engineering. So like we make sure that, factories or whatever like plants are following safety regulations when it comes to like air and water quality. So when they were talking a lot about the, rules from the DNR, I bet I could use these like resources to figure out like what kind of governmental programs would affect my future career in environmental engineering, and see like what specific codes and policies would be implemented.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here, Jack. Okay,
Mhm.
Andy, in your experience, so with all these codes, regulation, DNR, the works, what kind of challenges are implemented in your practices when trying to follow these rules? Is there anything that runs into issues with manure application on your side?
I guess the first thing that pops in my mind is when the crops are out, it's not that big of a deal to go out and stockpile manure, get the manure out of a feedlot and stockpile for later and to spread. Now during the growing season, that's where stuff gets in trouble. So they need to get that manure out of the feedlot, and we need to set it in the field for when the crop comes out to apply it. So what happens is we have to stockpile it is different than has different rules for when we apply. So stockpiling can only be there for 6 months, and it has to be it can't be a quarter mile within a residence. Well, sometimes the only place they can put it in the field is too close to a house. So then you have to go get permission, and if you don't have permission, then it just kind of gets hairy. It's just kind of you stumble on it a lot of times on stockpiling, I would say.
So what do you do if you have an issue stockpiling in a field and you don't know where to put it? Who do you turn to first, and what is your first action?
Well, it would be the producer. It would be the producer that has the manure. And then they can ask permission at the residence if they can stockpile. If they can't, they can't. They're going to have to find another field or knock over corn in another place. Or a lot of times they don't want to knock over crop to put manure in. And usually the open spot is by the residence. So, and if they say no, then they're just going to have to get farther away within, a quarter mile, and then they'll have to knock crop down to stockpile. I guess that's the biggest thing is during the growing season. We have trouble stockpiling.
Okay. So Brian, after hearing this about a farmer kind of struggling with knowing where to put his manure, what do you tell other farmers to avoid this happening? What are some things that you do to mitigate this problem for farmers?
Oh, I just think, we really instruct them to plan ahead and plan accordingly. So if they are, growing their farms, adding more capacity, they really need to have maybe an additional location to stockpile. Like was already just mentioned, there are separation distances that you have to follow. So really having a good idea of how much manure you're going to produce and how soon you can get it spread on the field is going to kind of determine how many stockpile locations you have. So we just really tell farmers to sit down and really think about what their goal is with that manure, because it is a very, very valuable resource today and shouldn't be wasted in any way, shape, or form.
What are some of your thoughts on this topic, being an individual studying environmental engineering? I know we kind of just asked this, but just hearing some more of their point of view inside of things, we just didn't know if you had a little extra to add about what you've been learning.
So I didn't realize how much manure was used in farming. You know, just hearing what they've been talking about with the like stockpiling issues and it shouldn't be wasted. Um, and that ties into a lot of like what environmental engineering is about. We try to be the least wasteful engineering major. So more like civil engineering is kind of close. It's in the same department as like environmental engineering, and they don't focus too much on like the waste side of things when it comes to wasting. Like concrete would be an example of a wasted resource. But environmental is a lot more aware of like issues with concrete or when it comes to like building dams for water. I can see like a big correlation piece when it comes to talking about stockpiling. Like it's a huge piece of farming and agriculture, is how like water and like concrete would be a huge resource for like environmental engineering.
That's great, Jack. That's great. So Brian, what are some consequences if these farmers are stockpiling in places they shouldn't? I'm not sure if this is a common thing that happens or not, but what could some consequences be if that happens?
Well, probably the biggest one is the farmer's going to have to move the stockpile to another location, which just kind of takes away a lot of, adds a lot of labor costs and expense to do that. And also the possibility of a fine does exist, especially if it would lead to a water quality violation. Then you're talking, a fine for the act, and then there could also be a fine for every day that stockpile remains in that location until it's moved. So, it's really in the farmer's best interest to do their homework, give us a call, and we can really instruct them on what the rules are and where those stockpiles need to be placed in order to avoid any potential issues with an environmental agency.
If someone were to notice this, who would they call? Would they call the DNR, or who would be in charge of kind of facilitating the laws for that if there was an incident where the stockpiling was not in the right place?
So if there was a question about it, the individual that would drive by the stockpile would call DNR and file a complaint. And then once that complaint's filed, DNR is required to go out to the farm to look at the issue and talk to the farmer about the stockpile, and then would determine if it is in fact in violation, or if it was just a nosy neighbor that was overly concerned about something and just wanted to turn the farmer in.
That's great. And something I don't think we've discussed yet is why we don't want these manure piles too close to where they're not supposed to be. So Brian, do you kind of want to get into that and talk about why we have these regulations? I'm not sure we've really talked about that yet.
Yeah, so it really just comes down to the regulations are in effect because we don't want to have a water quality violation of any sort. So when those stockpiles are located in the field, one of the best things to do is it's kind of put it out in the field somewhere where it's not visible by the road. That seems to cut down on a lot of problems. But also, you can't have it too close to tile inlets. You can't be in grass waterways. You can't have it on slopes greater than 4%. And the list goes on. But really, it's just to make sure that we maintain the quality of our natural resources, especially water quality out there. So all those rules are put into effect, just to kind of keep the environment safe, and then also maybe hopefully reduce some worry just from citizens and that don't understand livestock farming today.
So I come from a background, my dad is a dragline manure pumper, and or manure applicator, sorry. We're from Northeast Iowa, and he's been doing it for around 20 years now. And I always know, like, he's talked about sometimes, like, I don't know the ins and outs of the manure pumping, but I know he's brought up a few times, like, some of the neighbors of some of the farmers will, like, try and call him in for, like, thinking he's doing something wrong. And, like, there's just been different instances. Like, one of the neighbors didn't like the tractor lights at night, so she called them into the DNR, and they didn't get in trouble or anything about it. But there's just been, like, instances I know of that, like, people are just trying to get them in trouble or cause issues. Is there, like, a lot of that goes on that you have to deal with, or is that more of the DNR side of things?
But we occasionally get phone calls from frustrated farmers, like for reasons you just mentioned, that neighbors or somebody in the community is upset that they're hauling manure or spreading manure. There might be a little odor associated with it.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, if somebody does turn an applicator in, DNR is the one that's going to follow up on it. We're not really going to get involved. But it does happen a lot. And, I've heard situations where those drag lines, the hoses have been cut in multiple places, field entrances blocked by cars. So, yeah, it happens more than it should. And it's like all over the state. So,
Yeah. My dad's had some instances that are a little scary. Sometimes there was gun holes in the one hose, and that was a little just alarming to be like, here. I don't think I was supposed to hear it, but hearing him on the phone with my mom telling her this, and it just kind of, they're helping our feed our world and stuff, and it's just a little scary that it can get to be like that. So it's fascinating to hear these insights from both of you. Now let's explore the speculations and stereotypes often associated with your positions. Andy, what are some common speculations people have about manure application from your point of view?
Sometimes a lot of people think we can get to, or we're too close to them, a neighbor acreage. And we have every right to be in the field. And a lot of times they think we're too close and we're not. I've had that. I've had where the air is real heavy and they thought we couldn't spread manure when the air was real heavy. They needed to wait till there was a wind away from them. Just all kinds of false things that they think they know and they don't. As far as the people living out in the country, they're just, a lot of them are just removed from agriculture.
Okay. Brian, do you get some of these as well in your position? Kind of the same thing, some speculations or stereotypes that you hear? This is kind of a follow-up question from Carly's.
yeah, I think, the biggest one that we hear is that, the misconception that manure is polluting the environment, that farmers are just going out and dumping manure in creeks and rivers and everything, and that they don't follow their manure management plans, and there's not proper training done by anybody that applies it, which obviously is completely false. Manure has a lot of value. Farmers aren't going to want to waste it. Custom applicators are highly trained. They do a great job. They're responsible for, fertilizer basically on the crop next year to make sure it grows. So probably the biggest misconception we hear is just that it's polluting the environment and there needs to be stricter laws. But I do believe that the laws that are on the books now do a great job, and we don't need any more rules on that.
I would agree from that point of view as a manure applicator's daughter. My dad pumps in eastern Iowa and then does a lot of jobs in Illinois and Wisconsin. And I know each state has different rules and regulations, but in every single one of the states, they have to, I think it's either Wisconsin or Illinois. I think some of them are like online training courses where you have to do modules. And then Iowa, I think they usually go into like an extension office or things. But every single state, they all have rules and regulations where all the manure applicators and their employees have to go through the training to learn how to do it correctly.
So Brian, do you have any resources at the coalition or any other people that you give out their contact information to when people have these questions about this? What resources do you hand out?
So, we get more into the siting and the rules and regulations of putting up new livestock barns and feedlots. And so when we go out and work with a livestock farmer to help them site the barn, and explain what adding additional livestock numbers are going to do, we usually just use handouts right from the DNR, whether it be on siting or manure management plans. And if they do have additional questions on setting up a manure management plan, that's when we refer them to a manure management plan provider and get them in touch to help write that plan, because we don't write plans. We just kind of help explain what's expected once you have a plan and how to go about getting one.
Okay, thank you for that. Jack, do you have any input or point of view on any of this?
So I didn't know like all these, how heated it could get between neighbors and manure applicators. That was interesting to hear. Um, I just wanted to ask, like, is it like a very prevalent problem with manure applicators, or is it more of a rare occurrence?
Pretty rare. It's not as much as you would think, but it does happen. A lot of times it's with an acreage owner that already has the beef with the farmer, usually, and that's just their excuse to mess with them, basically.
It's interesting to hear about like how many resources are available, and the training that every state requires. I didn't know that each state was different. It would be interesting to see, like the difference between like maybe a more heavy agriculture state like Iowa versus one that isn't so into agriculture, maybe like, Maryland or Delaware, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, Jack. So Jack kind of brought up a good point that will kind of lead into. Andy, what kind of regulations do you and your crew have to follow each year to be a custom applicator? And do you want to explain what a custom applicator is?
So, as far as every year we have to go in, we have to register, pay our dues, get educated, pass a test. If there's anything new between year to year, we have to get adjusted to that. And then, I don't know, but if there is changes, we have to know the changes every year.
What defines a custom applicator? Like, why are you called a custom applicator?
We're doing it for money. So we're not the actual farmer that produces the manure. We are a separate third party that just applies the manure.
Why would someone want to hire you and not do it on their own? What are some reasons for that?
Oh, time, labor, equipment expenses. They don't have to have any of that. They can sit there and concentrate on, taking care of the cattle and not worry about the manure. And they'll just pay us to do it, to take care of it. A lot of times they don't have the labor. There is a deal with 200 in Iowa, I believe it's 200A, where a big, they have a manure management plan, a big feed yard or a lot of poultry. If you are selling the manure, that puts it in a different category because now there's money involved. So the farmer's actually selling the manure for a fertilizer. So there's money involved, and then there's some different, they have to have a custom applicator that is licensed to apply it. And they have little different rules just because there's money involved because it's a fertilizer.
Okay. So when you and your crew are going in each year to get recertified, how long does that take? What's the process on that? Is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a month?
Yeah, it's usually just an afternoon. We usually go in the extension office, and the ISU does like about a 3-hour video, and then a recap, and then a short little test, and then pay your dues, and we get our cards in the mail, and then you're legal for another year. And it's every year. It's annually.
Okay. I kind of have a question for Andy and Brian, kind of going back on the side of farmers using custom applicators or just doing it themselves. Have you seen, like, in the last few years, more farmers just getting their own equipment and doing it themselves? Or do you think it just kind of varies from place to place, whether they use custom applicators or do it themselves?
Yeah, there's both. Manure applicators, they've always been there. They've kind of gotten more popular. I kind of seem to think if they get too expensive, the custom applicators, and the farmer has a very good year and is diversified with crops and they have a very good year, they will tend to maybe spend money on manure equipment and do their own. But that's only if, they're making pretty good money and so on. A lot of times they don't want the hassle. They don't want to mess with it. They don't have to clean anything up. They just have a custom guy do it.
Brian, from your side, do you guys offer, or what do you see? What word do you see from the Coalition of Iowa's point of view about that?
I would agree with Andy. For the most part, most of the farmers that we work with, especially as they get larger, will hire that manure application out to a custom applicator, just so they have time to do their other chores and duties associated with making corn stalk bales or, hauling out manure. So most of the time, what we see is they'll just hire a custom applicator to do it and get it done right.
Okay. And then resources wise, Andy kind of talked about how he has to go in and Iowa State offers some things, some materials for them and their crews. Do you guys offer anything at the coalition? Do you guys put on any trainings or anything like that?
Not for manure management plans. So if a farmer wants to do it on their own, they would still need to go to a meeting similar to what Andy was talking about, but it would be for just more of a custom manure application certification, or not custom, sorry, but to do it on their own farm. And a lot of guys will do that if they've got dry bedded cattle manure, for instance. I don't see a lot of guys doing it on the liquid side for cattle or hogs, but there are a few out there that do that. So we would just refer them to ISU Extension to get the proper training.
Okay. All right. So we'll kind of move forward in topics here. Andy, I'm going to ask you this question first, since you're kind of the boots on the ground. Do you see any changing environmental issues arising from the manure application? Is anything a little different than it was when you first started?
No, it's gotten a little more popular. Since commercial fertilizer had gone up a couple years ago, more people wanted to buy manure because it was a better value and a better fertilizer. It has gotten very popular. And a lot of times these farms produce enough for themselves and then some more. So it's gotten to a point where some of these guys are making money with manure, going to 200A and selling manure. I would say it's kind of gotten more popular. I think a lot of people have come around and know that it's a very good fertilizer. We are not over applying. Why would you put too much on than you have? That's just why would you pay more money to do that? That is crazy. Why people think that everybody over fertilizes that. Why would you pay more money to lose it? You know what I mean? I would say it's gotten more of a kind of a commodity or a fertilizer. It has its own kind of machine. People like it. Has more sulfur. It has a lot of micronutrients in it that commercial fertilizer doesn't have. You're not relying on co-ops with the fertilizer and the commercial fertilizer. It's more organic. You have more organic matter. Overall, it's a better fertilizer, and I think a lot of people have found that out. And it's getting kind of more sought after, I believe.
Okay. So you mentioned that this is a better fertilizer. So you kind of touched on this for a little bit, but what makes a better fertilizer? Is it using less, but it's providing more, the fertilizer itself?
Correct, with the micronutrients. With
Okay.
commercial fertilizer, just NPK, it's just you don't have the organic matter, you don't have the sulfur, you don't have all the micronutrients that the plant needs. Sulfur is a big thing. Corn needs a lot of sulfur. Back when we were polluting in the 50s, 60s, 70s, you would have acid rain. Acid rain was actually sulfur, and that was actually really good for the corn crop.
Mm-hmm.
So since we took the sulfur out of the diesel fuel and the pollution, it's actually the corn has been really needing sulfur more and more. Just because we cleaned up one industry, it kind of hurt another industry. So sulfur would be a kind of a bigger thing for corn with manure, I would say.
Okay.
And then to Brian, to kind of follow it up, what major environmental issues do you aim to combat in your role?
I think probably the biggest the biggest issue is just assisting livestock farmers to make sure they do things right. We are putting up a lot of cattle buildings today. Some of those open feedlots, if they're not sited in the best location, maybe Grandpa did it in the 50s and 60s, and there are some runoff concerns. Putting those cattle under roof today does make a lot of sense, just to avoid any potential issues and runoff to enter into a water of the state. So I think that's probably the biggest one that we are addressing, as well as we get more and more information and knowledge about the benefits of manure that Andy just talked about. It just really makes sense to manage that fertilizer, that manure, as a fertilizer source, and utilize it to its full potential to grow crops following year.
That's great. So, Dad, or Andy, I'm gonna come back to you on this one. Why don't people talk about this? Why are people not talking about how great this is, and why is this not the big new hot thing? Why is this not talked about?
It is down on the farmer level, I would say. It's not above that because you have people downplaying it because they sell fertilizer, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or they have their hand in a cookie jar somewhere above manure. They have, and it has a black eye. It smells. It draws flies. And it's hard to stockpile, and you don't want to smell the manure, all summer. It has its black eyes, but it is the best. It is the best fertilizer.
Yep.
You put it on the ground. For the corn plant, you harvest the corn for the cattle, and it's just a complete circle. That's a circle where it's supposed to be.
Okay. So, for those who don't know, Dad or Andy, sorry, can you explain if you're getting fertilizer from the co-op, what does that mean? How is that different from what you do?
Well, it's mined, so that fertilizer is mined and usually boated in. It comes up the river, down the river, and then it's trained into it's railed into the co-ops, and it's usually just N, P, and K. Nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus is the major ones. And it's mined usually in Canada, other places in America, Ukraine, Russia. And so there's transportation involved with it. So it's gotten a little more expensive. If your petroleum's up, your transportation up, then your fertilizer's up. Well, manure just kind of stays kind of stable because it's local. It's right down the road. You're not having a lot of transportation. And it's organic. You have organic matter, like I said, and sulfur and so on and so forth.
Okay. Gonna stick to talking to you, Andy. Is there any manure alternatives that you have heard of, or any sort of new hot thing that they're trying to bring to you instead of this custom application?
Not to me, but I did hear on hog manure is very water soluble. It's very, I think it's like 80% water, right? There's some new discussion on some treatments and some ways where they're taking the water out of hog manure, and then turning it into a dry. So you're not having to transport all that water, which does not have the nutrients in it. It's just a carrier. I've heard of that's the newer stuff. There is sensors, UV sensors now they're putting on spreaders that exactly how much NP and K you are putting on. So instead of getting a test on the whole pit, it is live action on exactly how much P and K. So you're not over applying. So it is live of how much NP and K you are applying. It is live. It is, you can't, that's pretty neat.
Okay. So Jack, you're listening to all this and you're like, there's a lot going on here. Is there any, with all of these facts, some of the things that you probably could use in your future development, how do you feel about all this? How is this coming to you? Are you kind of striking some new ideas for some things that you would want to do in your future with this?
I know they touched a lot on the environmental aspects of this, and it seems to tie in a lot of what, environmental engineering is about. So, like when they were talking about the cycle of, the cattle produces the manure, and then it's used on the crops, and then the crops are eaten by the cattle, so it goes full circle. I really like the idea that they're perpetuating here. And talking about making sure that the water is safe, and the runoff concerns of like manure not running into the waterways, Iowa waterways, is very it sounds really good to me. So like going back to what you, if I would want, how I would use some of these ways or some of these methods in my future, I could see myself very easily working with, you know, uh, the custom, what was the term? It was like the custom
Custom applicator.
applicator.
Hmm.
Okay. Yep. Working with custom applicators in the future to just kind of like, you know, maintain these standards. And, if I stay in Iowa all my life, that could very well be an easy, path for me to pursue, since, so much of Iowa is focused on agriculture.
So, Brian, we're going to kind of bounce back to you to the question I just asked Andy. Have you heard of any manure alternatives or anything, any rumors or discussed anything where you're at?
I wouldn't say alternatives to manure, but I think maybe a further breakdown of the manure that we have now. For instance, anaerobic digestion is gaining some popularity as a source to improve the quality of that manure. And then also, we've worked with several cattlemen that are putting manure out in stockpiles, windrows, and turning it into compost, which the good thing about that is it enables you to haul it a lot further because you've removed the water, and the nutrients that you have are much more powerful than what they would have been in the original manure that was put out in those piles. So those are a couple things that farmers are experimenting with that are gaining a little popularity and might prove to be beneficial down the road.
Thank you. So, as we approach the conclusion of our discussion, Brian and Andy, do you guys have any vital information you'd like consumers or producers to know about manure management and sustainability?
Um, a little point that I ran into a few years ago is the nutrient reduction strategy, and I don't know if it's still going, but it was kind of a team in Iowa that we need to calm down on our nitrogen application in the fields, where basically they're saying we're over applying the nitrogen, it's getting ran off, it's going down the Mississippi, and it's killing all the sea life in the Gulf of Mexico, right? So I was like, okay, yeah, probably, whatever. And so they kept pushing, like, oh, we're killing the Gulf, we're putting too much nitrogen on. So then I actually went down there on a vacation and started talking to fishermen and stuff down there, and they're like, so, oh, gosh, are we a problem, up in Iowa, with nitrogen? And they're like, no. There's a lot of chemicals that are getting into it that hurt us. He goes, but yeah, no, there's not a lot of life down here anyway, because you have all fresh water coming into salt water. Nothing's supposed to really live in that anyway. And I'm like, duh, yeah, that's kind of, yeah, that's true, kind of a deal. And then on another thing, yes, there is runoff, nitrogen runoff, but I really don't think we are over applying. I don't know why someone would spend more money to just to let it go to waste or to let it go. That doesn't make much sense to me. I don't think anybody really does that. But that was kind of and I'll probably get yelled at on that by a naysayer on that. But like, yeah, all we were told there, 10 years ago is, oh, we're putting too much nitrogen, we're killing the Gulf. Well, no, it was always dead because it's half salt water, half fresh water. So, and I was like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense, kind of a deal. So, that was another thing, and it's just, I just hate people saying, oh, you're putting too much on. Well, why would we put too much on? Kind of a deal. That just costs money. Like, you don't just throw money away, kind of a deal.
That is a very good point, Andy. Brian, how about you? Is there anything that you really would like consumers or producers to know?
Well, I think maybe just, consumers just need to understand that the technology that we have today allows manure application to be probably more environmentally friendly than it ever has been before. We've got the GPS units now, so we can put the right amount of fertilizer on the acres that really need it, and maybe cut back on those acres that maybe have a higher phosphorus load. So again, we're doing everything we can to maintain and improve the quality of water in the state of Iowa. And so manure is just too valuable for farmers to waste it. We're going to monitor it. We're going to utilize it. We're going to put it where we need it because it is something at our disposal. And it really does reduce our dependence on non-renewable fossil fuels that we have to use to make the commercial fertilizer.
Thank you. So going back to Jack, as we're wrapping this all up, what insights did you gain from both of our professionals today in the industry? What are some things that might concern you, some things that intrigued you? I know we've kind of talked on it throughout the podcast, but we didn't know if you had any last minute remarks.
Everything that I learned today was very insightful. I didn't know all about about the contents that the manure contains. I didn't know, they were talking about like sulfur and like micronutrients and the organic matter. I didn't know, manure had all that, and I didn't know it was like a better alternative to fertilizers, or produced from fertilizers from different companies. I just thought, manure was a better environmentally option to compared to fertilizers. So that really stuck out to me. I didn't know that they were very concerned with like the waterways and everything. I didn't know like the runoff concerns were as grave as they are. But what they've said about, the DNR, making sure that they're maintaining these codes. And I did have a few questions that were vaguely mentioned. So Andy, you said that you spread dry manure and not liquid. So what's the difference between dry and liquid manure?
So that would be a pit barn. So any animal in a pit barn, it would be more liquid. So that would be cattle or hogs. Usually poultry is on dry and a lot of cattle is on dry in hoop barns on bed pack. So usually hogs and some cattle are more of a water based. They're in a pit. Everything goes below in the basement. Basically, it's collected in the basement. Basically.
Gotcha. So like when you were talking about, one of those new alternatives that are popping up is like the liquid manure with the hogs. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so they're I guess there's some companies are looking at, they're able to come in there, suck it all out, take the water out, clean it, and I don't know what they do with the water, but then you have a much smaller volume of fertilizer that's dry. So you're not applying all the water. Basically, they're just trying to get the water out of the equation. Basically, yeah. Yep.
Gotcha.
And then I said it wrong. It's not ultraviolet. It's infrared. Infrared sensors they're putting on manure applications that instantly knows how much the percentage of NP and K that we are applying in real time. That's big. That is big.
Gotcha.
So you're not over.
Other than that, I don't have too many questions. Let me just go over what I wrote here. With the stock, I didn't realize, how big of a, figuring out where your stockpile of manure goes. I didn't realize that would be, a major, piece of the manure puzzle.
Just during the growing season. See, and then with your liquid manure in your pit barns, they're actually storing it in water in the basement. So they don't have that issue. It's just for dry manure kind of a deal.
Gotcha.
Yep. I'd also elaborate on like a lot of bed pack barns. A lot of times we spread, they do a bed pack with cornstalk bales. So that's their bedding. They lay on it. And they pull that out and we apply it. And people think we're putting a lot on, but it's not pure manure. It's dirty bedding. So it looks like there's more than there is because it's not as potent as pure manure. If that makes sense.
Thank you so much to Carly and Ellie and our guests today. I learned a lot of things about manure through this episode. I've got some personal experience with manure. Having worked in the beef industry, I've spread some dry manure out on fields, and I know that there's a lot that goes into how it's regulated, how farmers are allowed to apply it, how they think about applying it. So it's good to hear some different perspectives on it and learn a little bit more about how it works here in Iowa.
Yeah, I assumed that there were rules for how it was done and when it should be applied on a field, but prior to this episode, I didn't realize how strategic it actually is, and I hadn't really considered that manure plans were a thing, and that the application process actually has a lot more logistics with it. Weather is a factor, and there's kind of a lot of moving parts that I just hadn't thought about before. I thought it was really well done. Yeah, I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I agree. There's just so much that goes into manure application other than just loading it in the spreader and putting it on the field. And they did a great job of choosing guests to kind of explain that process to us.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. So, to wrap this up, thank you all for tuning in. Please don't forget to send any questions, comments, or concern to be featured on the show. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time on CAP. To email us with any comments, questions, or concerns, please send us an email at contemporary@iastate.edu.